The storm outside howled as snow pelted against the cabin windows. Inside, Luke Miller, a rugged man in his mid-30s with dark hair and a beard, had just finished his work for the day. As he prepared to relax by the fire, a soft knock echoed through the silence. Confused, he opened the door to an unexpected sight. A wild Mustang stood in the midst of the raging snowstorm. Its coat was covered in snow, and a deep, visible wound marred its side. The Mustang's desperate eyes met his, silently pleading for help. Without hesitation, Luke stepped aside and let the horse inside, unaware that this simple act of kindness would alter both their lives forever. Once inside, Luke quickly shut the door, cutting off the howling wind and bitter cold. He grabbed a blanket from the couch and draped it over the trembling horse, offering whatever warmth he could. The Mustang's body was painfully thin, its ribs visible through its matted fur. Exhaustion weighed heavily on the creature as its legs wobbled beneath it, struggling to maintain balance. Yet, beyond the physical frailty, there was something deeper, a silent plea in its eyes, asking for more than just shelter. Luke knelt beside the animal, his rough hands gently brushing through its tangled mane. The Mustang flinched at first, wary of his touch, but after a few moments, it relaxed, sinking into the warmth of the cabin. Though safe from the storm outside, its condition was worse than Luke had realized. He glanced at the wound along its side, a gash not fresh, but one that had gone untreated for too long. Blood had matted the surrounding fur, and the sight of it sent a pang of sympathy through Luke's chest. How had this animal survived in such harsh conditions, alone in the wilderness? Determined to help, Luke retrieved his small first aid kit and knelt beside the Mustang. He cleaned the wound carefully, taking extra care not to cause more pain. The Mustang flinched once, but remained still, as if resigned to his care. As he worked, Luke spoke softly. "You're safe now," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if the horse understood his words. Yet something in the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. The tension between them faded, replaced by something deeper. Trust, maybe. When the wound was finally cleaned and bandaged, Luke stepped back, observing the Mustang's labored breaths. Despite the trauma it had endured, it remained standing. Admiration flickered in Luke's chest at the animal's resilience. He knew he couldn't send it back out into the storm, not in this condition. As the blizzard raged outside, he settled beside the Mustang, keeping a watchful eye on it. The fire crackled, its warmth filling the space, and the tension that had once filled the air began to dissipate. Yet, Luke understood that survival required more than medical aid. The Mustang needed food, rest, and time to heal. He had seen the way its body trembled earlier, weak from hunger, exhaustion, and perhaps something more. A deeper suffering lurked beneath its weary eyes, something that Luke couldn't quite place. He wasn't sure why, but the Mustang felt familiar to him, as if it carried a story he had yet to understand. Riley, Luke's loyal dog, sat nearby, her sharp eyes fixed on the new arrival. She had been quiet since the Mustang entered the cabin, but now her tail gave a slow, uncertain wag. Cautiously, she approached the horse, sniffing the air with curiosity. The Mustang's head turned, its gaze locking with Riley's in a long, silent exchange. Luke watched closely. Riley had always been a good judge of character, and she showed no signs of aggression, only curiosity. The Mustang didn't react with fear or hostility, only a cautious awareness. After a long pause, it lowered its head slightly and let out a soft snort. The tension between the two animals eased, and Luke exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. His gaze drifted back to the Mustang's wound. Though treated, the road to recovery was long, and the Mustang's future remained uncertain. Something about the horse unsettled Luke, not in a way that frightened him, but in a way that made him question. The Mustang had appeared at his doorstep in the heart of a snowstorm, alone and injured. It had found him, too many coincidences for his liking. He ran a hand through the horse's tangled mane and murmured, "Where did you come from?" The Mustang flicked an ear, but did not pull away. It had accepted his presence, just as he had accepted its. Days passed, and the storm finally subsided, leaving behind a landscape blanketed in pristine white snow. Inside the cabin, Luke kept a steady routine, caring for the Mustang as it slowly regained strength. Though still thin, its once weary posture grew steadier. He ensured it had food and water, watching as it ate with careful bites. A small but significant victory. Yet, Luke couldn't shake the question that lingered in his mind. The Mustang bore no brand, which was unusual. Most wild horses in the area belonged to known herds, or they bore the markings of ranchers. But this one was different. There was something in its eyes, something ancient, almost knowing. A week passed, and though the Mustang's physical wounds were healing, Luke sensed that its story remained untold. One afternoon, while working on cabin repairs, a distant whinny caught his attention. He froze, listening. The sound came again, unmistakable. Curious, Luke stepped outside. The Mustang stood at the edge of the tree line, ears pricked, gazing into the distance. Then, without hesitation, it turned and began walking away. Luke's heart skipped a beat. Was the horse leaving? Had it recovered enough to survive on its own? Something about the Mustang's deliberate steps unsettled him. It wasn't wandering, it was leading. Without thinking, Luke followed. The snow crunched beneath his boots as they moved deeper into the woods, further than he had ever ventured. The towering trees loomed above them, their branches weighed down by ice and snow. The air was eerily still, the silence almost unnatural. After what felt like an hour of walking, the Mustang stopped in a small clearing. Luke caught up, his breath coming in heavy clouds. The horse stood before a large rock, its hooves scraping against the snow-covered ground. Luke followed its gaze and crouched down beside the rock. As he brushed away the snow, he noticed something strange. A carved symbol, faint but deliberate, etched into the stone. It was no ordinary marking. It was intricate, with sharp angles and lines that formed a pattern unlike anything he had seen before. His fingers traced the symbol, and in that moment, a strange sensation rippled through him. A pulse of energy, faint but undeniable. Luke's breath caught in his throat. The Mustang stood beside him, watching intently, as if waiting for him to understand. Something about this place, this symbol, and this horse felt connected. The Mustang hadn't come to him by accident. It had led him here for a reason. The unease within Luke was growing stronger. He could no longer ignore the feeling. The horse had come to him for a reason. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a knock at the door. The sudden sound made him turn sharply, his heart pounding. It was unexpected. No one ever ventured this deep into the wilderness. He had no neighbors, no friends nearby. Isolation had been his choice, his refuge. With hesitant steps, he walked toward the door, his hand hovering over the knob. An inexplicable sense of dread coursed through him. Taking a breath, he turned the handle and pulled the door open. The night was silent and cold, an oppressive darkness stretching beyond the porch. There was no one there, but in the snow, just outside the cabin, something caught Luke's eye. Tracks. Fresh, deep footprints, too large for any animal he recognized, led away from the cabin toward the dense trees beyond. His pulse quickened. He glanced back at the Mustang, which now stood in the doorway, watching him with an unsettling intensity. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. It was as if the horse knew something he didn't. A decision was made before Luke even realized it. He stepped outside, his boots crunching in the snow. The tracks were clear, deliberate, disappearing into the forest's darkness. Without hesitation, he followed them, the air growing colder with every step. The moon cast eerie shadows across the landscape, stretching long and unnatural over the frozen ground. Silence enveloped him. No birds, no rustling of small creatures. Only his own breath and the rhythmic crunch of snow beneath his boots broke the stillness. The night felt watchful, as if something unseen lurked just beyond his vision. Then he saw it. A figure stood at the edge of a small clearing, just beyond a cluster of trees. Tall, cloaked in shadow, it was undeniably human, yet something about its presence felt ancient, otherworldly. Luke's breath hitched in his throat. The figure did not move, but he could feel its gaze, heavy and knowing. A shiver ran down his spine, not from the cold, but from something deeper, more primal. Summoning courage, he took a step forward. "Who are you?" His voice barely rose above a whisper against the wind. The figure remained silent. Then slowly it raised a hand and pointed downward. Luke's gaze followed, and his blood ran cold. Carved into the snow at his feet was a symbol, the same one he had seen on the rock in the clearing. It pulsed faintly under the moonlight, an ominous glow illuminating its intricate lines. Before Luke could react, the figure turned and vanished into the trees, leaving no footprints, no sign it had ever been there. Luke stood frozen, staring at the spot where the figure had been. His mind raced, struggling to make sense of what he had just witnessed. A low whinny made him turn. The Mustang had followed him, standing at the clearing's edge. Its eyes locked onto Luke's with an almost knowing expression. There was no fear in the horse's gaze, only quiet understanding. The figure was gone, but the encounter had changed something. The Mustang had led him here, just as it had led him to the clearing before. And now, a truth was beginning to form in Luke's mind. This was no ordinary horse. It was part of something larger, something ancient and powerful. Whatever this journey was, it had only just begun. Days passed, and Luke's life subtly, yet unmistakably, shifted. The Mustang was no longer just a stray he had taken in. It had become something more, an undeniable force within his world, guiding him toward places he couldn't understand. He had been alone for so long that the horse's presence felt like fate, as if it had arrived at precisely the right moment. Their bond deepened. Luke found himself spending hours tending to the Mustang, watching as it slowly regained its strength. No longer frail and trembling, the horse's coat had begun to shine, and the sharpness of its ribs had softened beneath newfound muscle. The wound on its side had healed, leaving only a faint scar as a reminder of the past. Yet, something else lingered, something Luke couldn't quite grasp. The Mustang was changing him. He had always been a man of solitude, content in the quiet isolation of the wilderness. But now, with the horse beside him, he found himself questioning things he had never considered before. What was this connection between them? Why did the Mustang seem to understand him so deeply? One crisp afternoon, Luke decided to take the horse out for a walk. The snowfall had ceased, and the sky stretched endlessly in a brilliant shade of blue. Saddling the Mustang with practiced care, he checked its side for any discomfort, though the wound had long since healed. The horse stood patiently, lowering its head slightly as if waiting. There was something about its presence, calm, grounding, that settled Luke's mind in a way nothing else had before. Together, they moved through the forest, the snow crunching softly beneath them. The stillness was peaceful, broken only by the occasional rustling of branches. Luke let the Mustang lead, trusting its instincts more than his own. As they walked, an overwhelming urge stirred within him, a pull toward the clearing, the place where he had first seen the symbol. He didn't know why, but he needed to go back. When they arrived, Luke dismounted and stood in silent contemplation. The symbol was still there, etched into the rock, its lines faint but unforgotten. The Mustang stood beside him, its gaze locked onto the markings. Luke knelt, tracing the edges of the design with his fingers. The moment his skin met the stone, a strange vibration coursed through him, a pulse like a heartbeat, but not his own. It spread up his arm, through his chest, filling him with a sensation both foreign and familiar. The Mustang let out a low whinny, shifting its head toward him. In that instant, Luke understood. The horse had not simply led him to the rock. It had shown him something that linked them in a way beyond logic, beyond the physical world. This was no ordinary horse, and this was no ordinary journey. As dawn's first light spilled through the cabin window, Luke stood in quiet reflection. The storm had passed, leaving a world blanketed in untouched snow. He gazed outside, watching the Mustang move effortlessly through the frost-covered landscape. No longer weak, no longer lost. The scar on its side remained, but it was no longer a mark of suffering. It was a testament to survival. Luke had changed too. The man who once sought isolation now felt the pull of something greater, something beyond his understanding. The question still loomed. The symbol, the strange connection between him and the Mustang, the energy that seemed to radiate from the horse itself. But one truth had become clear. The Mustang had come into his life for a reason. Stepping outside, he tightened his coat against the crisp air. The horse turned to meet his gaze. No longer just an animal seeking shelter. It had become his companion, his guide through the unknown. Luke approached, resting a hand against its strong frame. The Mustang nudged him gently, as if encouraging him forward. Luke didn't hesitate. He mounted the horse, feeling the steady rhythm of its breath beneath him. Together, they moved toward the horizon, toward whatever lay ahead. The path was uncertain, but Luke was no longer afraid. The Mustang was with him, guiding him towards something he couldn't yet name. As the wind whispered through the trees and the snow crunched beneath their movement, a quiet sense of peace settled over him. He was no longer alone. Their journey had only just begun. Luke and the Mustang rode deeper into the wilderness, the snow-covered trees towering like silent sentinels around them. The air was crisp, filled with an eerie stillness that made every breath feel sacred. The pull that had drawn him this far only grew stronger, an invisible force urging him forward. He didn't know where they were headed, but he no longer questioned it. The Mustang knew the way. As they moved through the forest, the landscape began to change. The trees became denser, their gnarled branches intertwining overhead, blocking out the sky. The shadows grew darker, the air heavier. Luke's heartbeat quickened. Something was waiting ahead. Something ancient, something watching. Then the Mustang stopped. Before them lay another clearing, but this one was different. The ground was bare, untouched by snow, as if the elements themselves refused to disturb it. At its center stood a massive stone slab, weathered with age, its surface covered in strange, intricate carvings. The same symbol from the rock, and from the snow, was etched at its heart. Luke dismounted cautiously, his boots sinking into the soft, undisturbed earth. The Mustang stayed close, its breath visible in the cold air, its ears twitching as if listening to something beyond human perception. Luke stepped forward, drawn to the slab. The energy radiating from it was almost tangible, humming beneath his fingertips as he reached out to touch it. The moment his skin made contact, the world shifted. A rush of visions flooded his mind. Images of people he had never met, places he had never seen. A vast land, untamed and wild, where men and horses moved as one, bound by something greater than time. He saw fires burning under the stars, ceremonies held in the name of ancient spirits. And then he saw himself, standing amongst them, not as an outsider, but as one of their own. The ground trembled beneath him, and the Mustang let out a deep, resounding whinny. Luke gasped, staggering back. The carvings on the stone had begun to glow, the lines pulsating with an otherworldly light. He turned to the Mustang, realization dawning upon him. "You knew," he whispered. The horse met his gaze, its dark eyes filled with something beyond intelligence, something almost human. And then Luke understood. This Mustang was not just a wild horse. It was a guide, a guardian, sent to lead him here, to awaken something that had long been dormant within him. He wasn't just a man seeking solitude in the wilderness. He was part of something ancient, something forgotten. The blood of those who had once lived in harmony with the wild ran through his veins, calling him back to a destiny he had never known. The wind howled through the clearing, lifting the snow in swirling patterns around them. The energy from the stone pulsed stronger, filling Luke with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. He turned back to the Mustang and reached out, placing a hand against its side. The connection was undeniable. A voice, not his own, yet deeply familiar, whispered in his mind. "It is time." Luke exhaled, his breath visible in the frigid air. He had spent his life running from the world, seeking refuge in solitude. But now he realized he hadn't been running away. He had been searching for this moment. The Mustang lowered its head, waiting. Luke knew what he had to do. He climbed back into the saddle, his grip firm, his heart steady. The path ahead was unknown, but he was no longer afraid. Whatever lay beyond the horizon, he would meet it head-on. The Mustang reared up, its powerful form silhouetted against the moonlit sky, then galloped forward, carrying Luke into the unknown. The trees blurred around him, the wind roared in his ears, and the glow of the ancient stone faded into the distance. Luke was no longer lost. He was home. In the years that followed, whispers of a lone rider and his wild Mustang spread through the land. Travelers spoke of a man who roamed the wilderness, moving as one with the untamed world, guided by forces unseen. Some claimed he had become part of the land itself, vanishing into the depths of the forest like a ghost. Others believed he had found the spirits of the old world, unlocking secrets that had long been forgotten. But one thing remained certain. Wherever the Mustang ran, wherever the wind carried its call, the legend of Luke lived on. And so did the journey.